If you are an ICF member, the following information might be relevant to you since ICF have new accreditation rules. The ICF now requires you to complete a quiz after watching a session recording so you can get CC units for it. After you've fully watched this session recording, simply scroll down to the session resources and find a one-question quiz. Please complete it and you will ensure that you've received the CC units for this session. And if you already attended this session live, you've already been granted the CC units for it and you don't need to complete this quiz. Also, here is a quick tutorial on how to get the most out of our new video player. Click on the CC button to turn on captions. Click on the search button, enter a specific keyword, and then click on the result. And you will be taken to the part of the video where your keyword is mentioned. Click here to download raw transcripts and head over here for the downloadable audio. That's it from me. Hope you enjoyed this session. Hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are joining us from. Thank you for being with us today. So, like always, we've started the session a couple of minutes early, just to give everybody plenty of time to come in and get settled before we officially start with the webinar, and we will start it at the top of the hour. So, if you already are settled in, welcome. And let me know if you can hear me by answering a question. What book are you reading at the moment, and would you recommend it? It can be either a fiction or a non-fiction book. I'm personally reading The 4 Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz. And wow, it's a simple book, but and it's only like 70 pages, but I'm reading it very slowly because I really want to bring each agreement to action. So quite a recommendation from my side. But we want to hear from you. Do you have any books that you're reading currently and that you would recommend? So in just a minute, we'll start with a fantastic session for today with Kristen Lasanti, whom I'll be introducing in several minutes, with the topic of transformational coaching, the 10 truths of radiant change. So Sandra recommends Into the Dark. Larry recommends Maslow on Management. Tracy recommends All the Light We Cannot See. Sharon is reading one about influence, and she says it's so good so far. Keep those coming in, and since we are at the top of the hour, we can officially start with the session. So once again, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. We are very happy to have you joining us today for the third session of this year's Coach Showcase. The session is Transformational Coaching, the 10 Truths of Radiant Change with Kristen Lasanti, whom I will introduce in just a moment. My name is Dominic Bortas. I work as the membership manager, and I will be your host for today's session. And we also have Leo, who is handling all of your questions and logistics in the background. So before we get started, just some quick housekeeping for everybody. This session is going to last 60 minutes. Please use the Q&A box to interact with us or to ask any questions you have for the speaker, because the chat box is disabled and is only used for us to send information to you. And if you'd like to discuss the content of this session with like-minded coaches in small groups, the Implementation Mastery sessions will take place 1 hour after this session ends, and also next Tuesday. And you can sign up for these by clicking the link in the chat box, which Leo will now share to you. And I also want to give a mention about the exciting launch of our coaching enablement platform. We sent out an email yesterday morning to you in which we opened the doors to this brand new platform, which now offers our 3 main services. One is the Center of Excellence, then the management software, and the marketplace, all which now lie under one roof. There will be no changes to your actual full summit sessions other than they are now called coaching mastery sessions. And they live inside the aforementioned Center of Excellence. But in the new year, we are going to be introducing some exciting updates and additions to enhance your learning experience even further. We have scheduled a welcome meeting next week on December the 6th, where we will go through these membership offerings in detail and provide a walkthrough of how to navigate this new platform. You can register for the welcome meeting inside your membership area, just like any other session. And we really hope to see you there. Now, going back to today's session, it is extra special because not only is it a part of the Coach Showcase, which is special in its own right, but it is also our very first coaching mastery session as well. So to make it official. But for those of you who are joining the Coach Showcase session for the first time, it is an exclusive feature which provides premium members with the opportunity to deliver their own very sessions. Coach Showcase sessions take place in the last week of every month, so we hope you can join for us as many of them as possible and support your peers as they take to the stage. So with that, I would like to congratulate Kristen on being selected for the Coach Showcase, and I'm delighted to introduce to you all now. She has coached hundreds of leaders and their teams to drive transformation at scale, guiding them through her proven process to spark and sustain meaningful change. Over 25 years, Kristen has held executive culture, talent, and communication roles in global firms, coaching CEOs, advising senior leadership teams, and building healthy, high-performance culture all around the world. She is trained and certified by the Neuro Leadership Institute, the Mindful Awareness Research Center at UCLA's Themel Institute for Neuroscience and Human Behavior, the Leadership Circle, and the International Coaching Federation. And a fun fact she just shared before session, she went for a hike yesterday and enjoyed the first snow this year for her. Small pleasures in life. And with that, Kristen, thank you for being with us today. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Dominic, and welcome everyone. I am delighted to be here with you today to share what I call 10 truths of radiant change. These 10 truths distill and comprise pretty much everything that I've learned in my 25 years of leading transformations in organizations and communities. And today they inform the work that I do as a coach, building my clients' capacity to lead transformational change in their businesses. All of my clients, and I suspect many of yours, are executives and executive teams who are navigating and or cultivating change in their organizations. And much of our work together focuses on helping them shift from transactional leadership, which is mostly focused on maintaining, reinforcing what worked in the past, to transformational leadership, which engages the whole organization in bringing forth new possibilities for the future. And as I am working to help them make this shift, I myself am on this continuous journey to be more transformational as a coach, focused less and less on solving my clients' problems and more on developing my clients as people. So my clients are on this journey, I am on this journey, and I suspect we're all on this journey together. But let's find out. We're going to launch our first poll of the session. Leo's going to bring it up for us. And we want to know, where do you see your work as a coach on a continuum of transactional to transformational coaching? Are you mostly transactional because you're focused on those rapid results and increasing performance short term? Are you mostly transformational? You're looking long-term root causes, getting at the person, not just the problem at hand? Or are you a mix of both? Really looking forward to seeing where we are as a group today. Give everybody a minute. I saw that we're such an international group today. And some of you are also, it's very early in the morning where you are. I saw someone chiming in from Sonoma. So welcome and thanks for being with us so early. Okay. Got a couple folks who aren't quite sure. Mostly transformational or a good mix of both. Wonderful. All right. So we are all in the right session here. I think this is the territory that we're going to be playing in today, where most of us are doing a good part of our work with our clients on a regular basis. Transformational coaching to nurture and equip transformational leaders. I believe strongly that without this inner work of transformation at the leadership level, we can't succeed in transforming our teams, our businesses, our industries, our societies. Because honestly, I've tried it. I've tried every shortcut. And I would like to assure you that everything I have to offer you today, I have learned the hard way. So let's start where I started with change, and in my experience, where most of us tend to begin. This is how we think change happens. Somebody identifies a need for change. They write a plan, smart plan. They execute a plan, and a hop, skip, and a jump later, ta-da, change is achieved. The plan worked. People did as they were told. Everybody feels great about it. Now, friends, has anyone actually seen change happen in this way? I haven't, not once. Change is not simple. Change is not linear. And I think we know this intellectually, but this expectation that this is how it's going to happen or how it's supposed to happen, this expectation persists. And this expectation creates so much suffering around change. And it limits our ability, our clients' ability to achieve and sustain meaningful transformation in their businesses. We think that if it doesn't go this way, that there's something wrong with our vision or with the plan or with us, and we get stuck. So I'll invite you to consider an alternative here. This is how change really happens. Although, admittedly, this is still a massively simplified model, but you can see we're using the traditional change curve to acknowledge the complexity, the messiness, the unpredictability of change. And this is the path we're going to travel together today, visiting with each of the 10 truths of radiant change. And as I mentioned, these truths come from my experience leading change, and they're also grounded in the wisdom of many other transformational leaders and teachers and coaches. We're going to hear from a number of them today as well. But I'd like to invite you, please do not take any of this at face value. Instead, consider these so-called truths through the lens of your own experience. Do they feel true to you? You too are an expert on change. So we're going to move swiftly through these, but for each truth, we're going to post a poll or ask you to share in the Q&A box how you apply that truth in your coaching so that we can all benefit from the wisdom of this community. Before we move on, let me share 3 principles that we use to organize these 10 truths. The first one is we can change. Yes, we can. The second is we are human. And the third is we must play. So let's start with we can change, which opens the first truth of radiant change, that change is inevitable. Nothing stays the same. There isn't actually a status quo to maintain, actually. Something is always changing. And sometimes we're going to be the drivers of change. Sometimes we're going to be at the mercy of change we didn't ask for and we don't want. But we and our clients can't prevent, can't avoid, can't control change as a force in our lives and in our businesses. We have to work with it. What's the one thing we can control? That is the mindset we bring to the change at hand. So this first truth invites us as coaches to consider the mindsets our clients are working with. I love the simplicity of the shift that comes from the conscious leadership group, from to me to through me. We can get stuck believing that change is happening to me, which can show up in a number of different forms, right? Our inner villain is kind of out for ourselves and blaming everybody else for the change at hand. Our victim is overwhelmed and helpless, and the hero is trying to save the day all on our own. But our clients are much more powerful when they can tap into a through me mindset, where the villain becomes a constructive challenger, where the helpless victim becomes an inspired creator, and where the well-intentioned hero can serve as a coach for other people, helping to develop their capacity. So I'm going to invite you to jump into the Q&A box here and let us know, how do you help your clients check their mindset? Right? Where does mindset show up in your coaching? For me, this starts in the chemistry check conversation, actually, before I've even entered into an engagement with a client. I'm listening for whether they're in to me or through me mode. I'm also kind of testing how they respond to invitations to make this shift. And if it seems a leader is really committed to staying in to me, it might be a sign that they're not ready for coaching, or that I might not be the coach for them. And of course, these mindsets apply to us too, as coaches, don't they? We're going to talk more about our mindset and how it informs our coaching relationships a little bit later on. For now, I love this quote from Jim Detmer of the Conscious Leadership Group, who says, "At any particular time, leaders are operating from either fear or love." If I may be so bold, I might also offer that any meaningful change is a shift at its core from fear to love. So, having accepted that change is inevitable, we also have to believe that change is possible. The truth about this is the power of our purposeful vision to guide us, to ground us, and to galvanize us and others into action. But this is really important, an important distinction for us and for our clients. A vision is not just a result. I want that next promotion. The vision is a new reality that makes all the results that we want inevitable. So the client who wants the next promotion, their vision might actually be something like, I will be a thoughtful, engaging leader who's a go-to resource in my organization. So vision isn't about doing something or getting something. It's about being. And a vision becomes purposeful when we imbue it with impact, right? Why is this important to you? Why is this important to those around you? How will you feel when you achieve this vision, when you're stepping into your leadership in this way? How will the people around you feel as a result? Vision is critical in transformational coaching because it activates the prefrontal cortex in the brain, the so-called CEO of the brain, which we want to keep engaged as much as possible in the work that we are doing as we navigate change. It's not easy to do, as we'll see. The prefrontal cortex has a lot of competition. So establishing a vision, a purposeful vision, and staying focused on it as much as we can is critically important. In the Q&A box, we'd love to know, how do you tap into your client's vision? How do you make vision accessible to them? Is something I'm curious about in particular. Not too grandiose, not too tactical. How do you bring vision into your coaching? One of my favorite tools for doing this, I'm sharing here, and this is probably a good opportunity to let you know that not only will you receive the slides from this presentation, but you'll also receive a one-pager with some powerful coaching questions around these 10 truths. One of my favorite tools for tapping into a client's vision, whether for an individual leader or for an executive team that I'm working with, is the SOAR model from the Appreciative Inquiry School of Organization Development. Some of you might be familiar with this. SOAR is like the traditional SWOT model of strategic analysis, but more visionary. So we begin in the present moment with our current strengths, open up to opportunities, which are not opportunities to improve, but opportunities that exist to be leveraged around us. And then we start to orient to the future, aspirations, trying to free ourselves and our clients as much as possible from constraints for the purposes of this exercise, to really think big. And then grounding those aspirations in impact with concrete results. I'll often pair this SOAR inquiry exercise with a visioning exercise too, inviting my clients to use their imaginations to time travel forward 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, which really activates the prefrontal cortex, which really helps them see and feel the future that they want to create, that they're working toward. We typically will boil down their vision statement to a phrase that's inspiring to them and important to them, and this becomes their North Star for the whole of our coaching engagement. And our vision is critical because a smart plan alone is not going to cut it. That brings us to our third truth of radiant change. Change is complex, as we talked about before, not simple, not linear. It's complex because we all live and work in a mesh of complex systems. We talk about systems a lot. Let's define what we mean by system before we go any further. A system is defined as a group of interconnected elements that work together toward a function, a purpose, or a result. In a system, everything is connected to everything else. So it's not possible to know or predict the full impact of any one change that we make in a system. Can't predict exactly how it's going to unfold. There is no plan that can account for all the variables in a given system. So that's the first thing to understand about systems. They're massively complex. Sometimes I'll say to my clients who are struggling to grasp this, they might be in a relationship, they might be married. Think about the complexity in that relationship. And that's only 2 people, right? Exponentially, when we're talking about a team or an organization, the complexity is just massive. But systems, in addition to being massively complex, are also resilient. They adapt to new information that are being brought in continuously by feedback loops. They are self-organizing. They're inherently intelligent and whole, and they're hierarchical. But by this, we don't necessarily mean they're governed top-down, command and control style. Indeed, in healthy systems, the top serves to coordinate and to enable the subsystems to perform at their best, right? So the hierarchy is there to balance the autonomy of self-organization, which is very natural in any system, with the coordinated alignment toward that system's shared function, purpose, vision. Yeah. When I think of systems being resilient, self-organizing, hierarchical, I hear echoes of the CTI principle, right? That our clients are naturally creative, resourceful, and whole. And that's no accident because our clients are systems. They are systems themselves that contain subsystems, from their microbiome to the various characters and voices that live in their heads. They're also part of larger systems, right? Their families, their teams, their companies, their communities. And our relationships with our clients is also another system within all of these. So, the complexity, right? It's boundless. Leo, let's go ahead and open up our next poll. I'm interested to know how systems thinking informs your work, if it does at all. Take a moment to consider. We're offering you some options here. And you can select as many as you like. What feels real and relevant for you? While you consider this, I'll share one of my favorite quotes about systems from Donella Meadows, who wrote the excellent book, Thinking in Systems, which I highly recommend if you are interested in systems thinking. She says, an important function of almost every system is to perpetuate itself. Now, this will present challenges to transformation, no doubt. when systems are committed to perpetuating themselves, to keeping themselves going. But it also means that more transformation is possible if we are working with the system and not against our client's system, right? All right. Okay, poll results coming in. Oh, beautiful. We've got a lot of systems thinkers in the group. Oh my goodness. Please expand on this in the Q&A. Would love to leverage the deep wisdom that you folks are bringing to me. And for those of you, the 30% for whom systems thinking is new, check out the resources available around this topic. And in particular, it's a little nerdy, but Thinking in Systems by Donella Meadows is such a great primer on this topic. So highly recommend. So how do we work with the client system? Let's take a look at this. This is a tool that I am always thinking about with my clients, and I'll even share it with my clients to help challenge their thinking. This is the Systems Thinking Carrot. Classically, it's an iceberg, but I made a carrot for a client's gardening themed offsite one time, and I really liked it, so I'm sticking with it. The Systems Thinking Carrot invites us to get curious about what's not immediately apparent to us and to dig deeper into the system. So we and our clients start at the top, right? With a given event on a given day. And the inclination here is usually to jump to what's happening, whose fault is it, how fast can we fix it, right? That's the level at which our clients are operating a lot of the time. But that doesn't really allow us to understand what we're working with, right? If we're staying at the level of the event, we aren't attending to the system. We don't actually know that there's a whole carrot down there, that there's deep roots that we need to get to. So with systems thinking, our first step is to look at events over time to find patterns. Has this happened before? When? Is there a trend? Will it happen again? Then we can dig even deeper and we can look to the structures that are supporting this pattern, right? What's keeping this going? What have we built or designed that is actually making this pattern inevitable? And perhaps we can start to redesign some of those structures. Finally, deepest down come paradigms. This is the level at which transformation is really becoming possible. If we can look to shift the paradigms that the system is built on, those assumptions or core beliefs that created the system in the first place and that keep it going. Again, our curiosity is our tool here for getting to the root. So asking questions like the ones we see here can help us dig into the successive layers of the system that we're working with. A coaching tool that does this excavation beautifully in a slightly different way is Immunity to Change by Robert Keegan and Lisa Leahy. A number of you are probably familiar with that tool. It's brilliant for getting to those big assumptions that power a client's system. And I use it all the time in my coaching. So those are the three truths that fall under our first principle. We can change. Now we're moving into the territory of we are human, with the truth that I don't know that anybody can disagree with. Change is uncomfortable. You may know that this dip in the change curve has a name, the trough of disillusionment. And it is, in fact, as inevitable as change itself, because change is always going to be uncomfortable. Any kind of coaching, especially transformational coaching, is going to be a challenge for folks. So I contract for discomfort with my coaching clients right from the start in our kickoff session. We talk about this and we normalize it. I think it's important to normalize discomfort and resistance to change as a natural part of the transformation process, right? Otherwise, when they hit this inevitable trough of disillusionment, clients might be inclined to think that there is something wrong with their vision or with themselves or with their coach. So why is change so hard? Let's, as we're normalizing it, let's also seek to understand. Well, let's consider that any kind of change, including change that we choose for ourselves, involves a loss of some kind. And if we are not choosing the change for ourselves, we're likely to perceive that loss as a threat. In comes our amygdala, our blessed security system, firing up, hijacking the brain's energy resources to activate the nervous system's stress response. All of this happening, of course, before the prefrontal cortex has even registered the threat. That's why resistance isn't conscious. It's not intellectual. You can't argue with it. It's instinctual. It's often existential. The SCARF model of threat and reward response from Dr. David Rock at the Neuro Leadership Institute can help us get specific about what core human need is being threatened here or perceived to be under threat. And that's where we can get to work as coaches, tapping into these core needs, helping our clients understand them and then get those needs met. The past few months, I've been learning from Paul Wyman and his inner team dialogue approach, which is really deepening my understanding of internal resistance and ambivalence as not the problem, but the source of the solution. Paul goes on to say something really beautiful that I'd like to share with you. Embracing ambivalence is not only a way to generate better solutions and decisions, but a gateway into a more nuanced view of one's own personality, motivations, and needs. By welcoming every part of the personality as helpful, it's a deeply compassionate way of relating to oneself, or more accurately, to one's selves. I want to highly recommend Paul's inner team dialogue training for coaches for anyone who is interested in helping their clients reconcile those inner voices. It is super powerful as a methodology. So in the Q&A box, let us know, how do you work with discomfort, ambivalence, resistance in your client? Right? What do you do with that discomfort? Or how do you engage? This is a question I will often ask my clients themselves. What do you do with your discomfort? My personal approach that I train teams on, I call surfing the curve, right? First, we expect resistance, normalize it. It's natural, it's normal, it's going to happen. Then we honor losses and we recognize threats, real or perceived. We leverage the emotional data that's coming forward to help our clients articulate and address their needs. And then we refocus on the vision and move to action. Only then. I have found it to be so important. This is another thing I've learned the hard way. Not to try to move from resistance right to action. I've learned I will certainly break something, and it just may be the trust of my client. Moving forward, we come to the truth that change is personal. What does this mean? Well, we all know that us versus them dynamics are one natural way that difficulty and discomfort with change manifests. When our amygdala is activated, we automatically start to sort people into us, in group, and them, out group. So when my clients are in conflict or opposition to someone else, I ask them, what would it look like to move from us versus them, me versus you, to we, starting with me? What would it look like to take full responsibility for your 50% of the relationship? Because the way I see it, every one of us is 50% of every relationship we're in, right? Even if there's a power differential there, no matter what's happening, we can still take personal responsibility for how we show up with our 50%. And the good news is that can be enough to change a dynamic. Nonviolent communication is one of my go-to tools for how it leverages feelings to illuminate unmet needs. We've talked about client needs in relationship to change, and now we're talking about client needs in relationship to other people, right? But as a coach, I know that I also need to be attending to my own personal responsibility in relationship to my client. What belongs in my 50% and what must be part of my client's 50%, right? And I struggled with this at first, admittedly. I'm curious whether you do too. Leo is going to bring up our next poll. when it comes to responsibility for your part of the coaching relationship? Are you taking too much responsibility? Are you taking too little? Are you taking just the right amount? Or maybe it depends. Maybe there are certain clients or certain contexts where you might be showing up and taking a little too much or too little. And take a moment, reflect here. As I was trying to sort through this and simplify this for myself, what my 50% looks like, I drew this simple diagram that you see here. So this is how I understand responsibility in a coaching context. As the coach, my primary responsibility is to bring my presence to my client and to see the possibility within them. Then my job becomes about inquiry, asking powerful questions, and sensing into what I'm hearing and seeing and feeling from them. But it's also my job to create structure for the engagement and for each session, and to challenge their thinking when they're stuck in some old paradigm, right? But what's never my responsibility, and always the responsibility of the client, always part of their 50%, is the realization of insights and the articulation and completion of their actions, right? So this is how I see that difference. And since I got clearer on this, my coaching has improved significantly. My clients are seeing much more transformational results. Okay, a number of you are right there where I have been, taking too much responsibility. And I think it goes back to that hero mindset, doesn't it? We care so much. We want to be of service. We want to be helpful. And sometimes we can step over into spaces where we're actually taking responsibility away from our clients. I certainly have had that experience. I'm glad to know that I am not alone. Okay, next up. Oh, we're powering through, making great progress, folks. Next up, change is not only personal, it's also creative. And here I'm using the word creative as an opposite of, or an antidote to, reactive. That little reordering of letters from reactive to creative makes all the difference in terms of a client's focus. I'm willing to bet that many of your clients, like mine, feel that they have to be firefighting all the time. Especially newer executives, I find, often approach their work as fixers, firefighters, right? After all, the ability to solve problems and put out fires probably got them this job in the first place. But no one has ever troubleshooted their way to transformational change. So it is in our clients' best interests to shift out of reactive firefighting mode and into a creative focus on building toward vision wherever possible. 3 reasons for this, in my view. A, as we've talked about, the brain can't do both at the same time. The brain can't be reacting to threats through the amygdala and also creating a beautiful, purposeful future according to their vision, right? We have to choose in a given moment. B, there are always going to be more fires to fight. Putting out a fire doesn't mean that now the forest is more resilient, right? We will always have more fires to fight if that is how we see our job. And C, building toward vision is what yields systemic solutions, not surface level solutions. Think about that systems thinking carrot. We want them focused on big shifts around root causes that change the events that are happening at the surface. This obviously pertains to our clients' calendars and to-do lists in terms of reactive focus on problems and urgency, but it's also about their orientation in a given moment. Are they reacting on autopilot to what's happening, or are they creating new possibilities by showing up consciously and with intention wherever they go? I start every coaching session with the offer of a brief mindfulness practice, not only to provide a reset moment to my busy client as they're coming in from their busy day, but also to equip them with different practices that build their capacity for present moment awareness. This quote from Viktor Frankl captures the power of mindfulness beautifully, I think. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space lies our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. Yep, typo there. Sorry about that. The ability to shift from reactive to creative in real time is so fundamental to change on any scale. I call mindfulness our transformational technology. It's not just about self-care. It's what allows us to see more clearly what's really happening in a given moment and to make new, more conscious choices in response. So in the Q&A box, if you would, please let us know what works for you to help your clients recognize that they're being reactive and to ease instead into a creative focus. I think the coaching process does this naturally a bit, especially if we're coaching toward a clear vision or a goal and we're helping our clients continually refocus on that vision or goal. We can also prompt this awareness, right? When we are asking our clients to check in with how they're feeling coming into a session or in a particularly challenging moment. This is also why I love the leadership circle profile. This is the leadership assessment, the 360 I use most in my work, because I love how it illustrates the difference between these two different leadership orientations, right? Helps clients understand that while their creative competencies correlate directly to their leadership effectiveness, the more we have of that, the more effective we are as leaders. The reactive tendencies down there in the Southern Hemisphere can go from strength to liability very quickly when they're too much a part of default programming. Okay, are you ready to have some fun? This might be my favorite truth. Change is fractal. We're going to look to nature for a moment to illuminate the fact that change doesn't happen all at once as a monolith or as the result of a mandate, but rather it's a gathering of momentum. A fractal is a growth pattern that repeats at different scales. Mathematician Benoit Mandelbrot coined the term in 1975 in his seminal work, The Fractal Geometry of Nature. A fractal's parts are essentially reduced size copies of the whole. Okay, that's how we can think about fractals. If you start to think about fractals, you'll start to see them everywhere in the world. When I'm training teams on leading change, we usually talk about people within the system being fractals of that system. And that's true of individual coaching clients too, right? They are fractals of the system they operate within. We can learn a lot about how a team or a company culture works based on the one leader that we are coaching. Another implication of this is that we, the coach, also become a fractal in this organizational system through our relationship with the client. Okay, stick with me here for a second. We can leverage this by practicing self as instrument, right? Bringing presence to our own experience in a coaching session. We can explore whether that reflects what the client is feeling in the system, or maybe what other people around the client may be experiencing in the system. So our clients are fractals of their systems, and we get to experience that perspective too. But change is also fractal. The fact of change, the force of change is fractal. It almost always necessarily starts small in one area of the system and then builds through repetition and reinforcement, and the system as a whole begins to reflect it. Adrienne Marie Brown, in her gorgeous book, Emergent Strategy, writes, "Small is good, small is all." So I'd love to know from you all in the Q&A box, how do you make change small with your clients? Honestly, I resisted this at first in my coaching. I wanted to tackle the big things, the important things. But in my experience, insights emerge rapidly when we start with one very specific part of a client's life or work. For example, their relationship with a difficult colleague. And then we look for connections to other parts of their life and work. For example, their home life, their marriage. Because what's going on at home is always connected in this fractal way, reflective of what's going on with work in some way. Our clients are the same people everywhere they go, right? Context matters, yeah, but at our core, our patterns are fractal. And it is so illuminating for our clients to make those connections between the parts of their lives and the whole of themselves. And then changes they make in any area of their lives impact the others too. Okay, with that, we are moving from we are human into our third principle, we must play, which starts with the simple truth that change is inclusive. So in organizational change, inclusive decision-making and co-creation are critical. If you co-create solutions with your team, you don't have to generate buy-in. They already own the change with you, right? It is a shortcut. That doesn't mean every decision is democratic, but it does mean that the big, complex ones are informed by as many relevant perspectives as possible. For me as a coach, how I work with this truth is, honestly, this is my personal practice with the part of me that thinks that she knows. She knows the answer, knows what's needed, knows what's best. So just as the transformational leaders that we're coaching must hold their own expertise lightly to make room for their team's ideas and gifts, we coaches are called to release our own expertise, our own experiences, our own assumptions to make space for our clients' insights and ideas. My colleague, Michelle Brody, who is part of the Full Summit, check her out, she's brilliant. She has a metaphor about coaching that speaks to this spirit of co-creation. She talks about a coach being with you in your dark cave, not with a map or a flashlight. Your coach doesn't know the way out, but simply with a willingness to hold your hand and feel the walls to find your way. Isn't that beautiful? This is where the spirit of play is not ornamental, but fundamental. Not knowing opens space for exploration for us and for our clients. So I want to know in the Q&A box, how do you co-create in your coaching work with your clients? How do you create inclusivity in your coaching? Personally, I find tremendous relief. And I mean, I can feel it in my body, like the loosening of a knot when I shift out of expertise and into curiosity, from knowing to beginner's mind, from cultural competency to cultural humility, from offering quagestions, which is what I did when I was a baby coach, to going deeper with, to continue the cave metaphor, spelunking questions, right? What's going to help us go deeper here? Go deeper. I always make space for choice on the part of my client. They don't want to do a mindfulness practice at the beginning of a session, no problem. And with teams, when I'm coaching teams, I tend to be even looser about structure. We have an outline of the territory I think we're going to be playing in, but I really make no assumptions that we're going to cover all of it. And I assume that we're probably going to color outside the lines a bit. It really depends on what the team needs that day, where they want to go. My only job is to make sure that wherever they go, they're going deeper. And that's so much easier to do when it doesn't feel like work, but when it feels like play. Which brings us to our next truth. Change is iterative, because the first idea we have or that our client has isn't guaranteed to work. In fact, it's likely to fail in some very important and helpful ways. So instead of treating a particular idea or strategy as the solution, as if there would be ever one solution to the complex challenges our clients are facing, right? Instead, we test, we learn, we iterate, right? For example, once we've identified a paradigm that's perpetuating a pattern in their system, clients can run little tests challenging that paradigm. In the immunity to change model I mentioned earlier, that's what we do. We test those big assumptions. And it really is a series of progressive experiments to see, is this really the way it is? Does it have to be this way? What if we did it differently? Let us know in the Q&A box, how do you encourage your clients to test and learn? Or perhaps, how do you iterate in your coaching practice? How are you testing and learning what works for you as you go forward in your practice? My two favorite questions for iteration, hands down, are so simple, you're not going to believe me that they get you anywhere, but Start asking yourself these two questions after every coaching session and watch what happens. What did I do well? And what will I do differently next time? I call this ask forward. Its technical name is self-directed feed forward. I would have a hard time selling that into my corporate clients, so I rebranded it ask forward. And it is without a doubt the most effective tool that I have found for cultivating a growth mindset in leaders, teams, and organizations. What did you do well? What will you do differently next time? Incidentally, inclusion and iteration are both core to design thinking. Some of you might be familiar with design thinking as an approach. It's a methodology that's used by designers of apps and software, products and experiences. And I kind of love this model for coaching too, right? We're starting with empathy, understanding the client's experiences, feelings, needs as best we can. We're defining the focus, which we do in goal setting or setting a vision. We're co-creating possibility, exploring that cave, unearthing insights, options, possible actions, and then testing and learning with new strategies to find out what works and what we or what our clients can do differently next time. Design thinking is not always presented as a cycle, but that's how I think about it. Because after all, change is infinite. We have reached the end of our 10 truths of radiant change, which is that change has no end. It is not a sprint. It is a marathon with no finish line. Now, this can be daunting, or perhaps it can come as a relief. After all, we can and will change more tomorrow, and our clients will too. So we can take the pressure off of ourselves or off of them to have anything that looks like completion or perfection. Instead, we can think and plan in terms of progress using multiple time horizons. And at each horizon, we can pause and look back at how far our clients have come, how far we've come. And we can look to the next time horizon and continue to make the small shifts that will get us there. We can teach our clients to think in this way as well, aiming for progress, not perfection. I'd love to know in the Q&A box how you track and celebrate progress in your coaching. And with that, here we are again, coming full circle, back to love, with the words of the activist, Grace Lee Boggs. Love isn't about what we did yesterday. It's about what we do today and tomorrow and the day after. When it comes to the infinite nature of change, which Boggs spoke and wrote about extensively, I think about our work as planting seeds, but not just any seeds. In this complex world, in our fractal work, each client, each coaching session can be like releasing the seeds of a dandelion out into the wind. And that concludes the 10 truths of radiant change. We've had quite the journey in these 45 or so minutes. As I mentioned, you will get the slides. You'll also have in your platform a one-pager of coaching questions that you can use here. But now we'd love to hear from you. What did you find interesting, challenging, affirming about this approach to change? What questions or insights do you have that you want to share?
Kristen, thank you so much for the insightful sessions. So much to unpack here. So like Kristen said, everybody feel free to post your questions in the Q&A box and we will bring them up for Kristen. And in the meantime, I just want to quickly remind you that we will be sharing a feedback survey to provide your input on Kristen's session today. And this survey will automatically pop up when you leave the Zoom webinar. So we would really appreciate your feedback for this. So Kristen, we've got some interesting questions. Let's start with Larry, who asked, is there a distinction between organizational development and organizational coaching?
Organization development and organizational coaching. Larry, I'm going to have to say, and I don't know to that one. I think that they're related. I would say maybe I think about organizational development as a field with many different disciplines within it. And organizational coaching, I don't know that I coach organizations. I think I coach leaders as high leverage points within their organizations. So we definitely work on organizational cultures. My particular commitment, especially having served as a chief culture officer in an organization that was going through a merger, is that really it's the leaders that have the highest leverage within those systems to make change. And so that's where I focus my coaching work for that reason. Change can come from anywhere within a system. Development of an organization can come from anywhere, but the leaders need to be doing their own development in order to develop the organization. That might be an unsatisfying answer, but that's what I've got for you.
Great. Larry, hope this helps. Before the next question, Kristen, could we just close the slides so our viewers could see us better?
Certainly. Sure. Yeah, thank you.
Great. So, second question. You mentioned that it is normal that we face discomfort. And through that discomfort, you mentioned that it would be useful for us to honor our losses. Could you give out an example of this? How do we honor our losses?
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of the time when we are moving forward toward a purposeful vision, when we are moving an organization or a team toward change, we sometimes have a tendency to focus on where we're going in a way that almost dismisses or discounts where we've come from. Right? So an example of this might be working with a team who's going through a merger or an organization that's acquired another organization. The tendency can be to focus so much on getting everyone together onto the same team, adopting the same processes, adopting the same values, adopting the same culture, that we actually are in the process of losing some things that were sacred or special about the organization in the past. What I'm proposing is taking some time to recognize that those things are being lost and to honor what was special about them. So, for example, there could be conversations about, okay, we're moving from working in this way to working with this way. We know that that was really important to people. Let's have some time and space to talk about that, right? And how can we bring what was so valuable to us from that approach forward into what we're creating now? If we even create time and space for connection and for honoring those losses, it can help people lay to rest, right, what's being lost and move forward in a much more effective way and also in a much more easeful way.
I love that. So it's expressing gratitude for things that served us in the past before moving on to the future.
I think so. And taking the best of what works. It doesn't have to be a wholesale swap out either, right? So I think there's a lot to be unpacked within that notion of honoring what's lost.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. So moving on, Tommaso asks, could you please make an example of application of this framework in an executive coaching environment? Do you always use the entire framework? So from 1 to 10, all 10 truths, or according to the executive needs, do you focus on a certain truth?
Yeah, thank you, Tommaso. I do not present this framework to my clients unless I'm in a training capacity. So I have a course that this is built around. Executives come and take the course when they're navigating large organizational changes. What I'm doing as a coach in my coaching context is I'm holding these truths in mind and using them to understand where my client is in this journey and what they might need, right? So if they are in the trough of disillusionment, right, I'm looking for what those losses are. What threats are they perceiving? When they are looking to start to construct strategies and plans toward their purposeful vision, I'm challenging them to think about what might it look like to co-create this with your team, right? And really making sure that the ways that they're leading toward change are inclusive. So from a coaching perspective, it's less explicit. But as I said, there are elements of it that I will certainly share in visual form. That systems thinking carrot, my clients love it. They see it and they're like, oh my gosh, I've been stuck at the event level, right? What does it look like just to get down into pattern or just to get down into structure? And it can be really illuminating for them. And that's the kind of thing that they can take right back to their teams too. So I would invite you to take what works and play around with it, and see what works for you, see what works for your clients.
Great. Thank you for sharing. And a final question. You showed a quote from the book Nonviolent Communication. And it said that if somebody is overly critical or gets angry, it is often a tragic expression of an unmet need. Could you give an example of what kind of a need lies behind this criticism or anger?
Yeah, absolutely. Anger, in my understanding of that emotion and my personal experience with it, is typically pointing to a boundary that has been violated in some way. Now, whether that boundary was firmly established and communicated is up for debate. But typically when we feel anger, in some way, we are feeling violated. So we may need more respect. We may have a need for more understanding of what our boundaries are and what our needs are. We might have a need for patience. There's any number of things that I think anger can be pointing to. One of the things that I think can also be useful is to look for the emotion that's below anger, because it's usually right there on the surface, and there's something else underneath, like fear, like sadness, right? That contains even more emotional data for us to bring forward and leverage. So anger for me is usually, okay, there's a boundary that's been violated here. Can we identify what that is? And then what is the fear or the worry or the loss that we're responding to, that we can dig a little bit deeper into? Always a need at the core of all of our strong emotions, particularly our difficult ones.
Brilliant. Thank you. This is very useful. So as we hit the top of the hour, let me just say a few outro words. Please, everybody, don't forget to complete the quick feedback survey that I just referenced. This will pop up when you leave the webinar. And we also hope that you can join one of the implementation mastery sessions, either in exactly 1 hour or in one of the sessions next Tuesday. And you can sign up for these by clicking the link in the chat box that Leo will now share for you. Mm-hmm. Now, before we say goodbye, Kristen, again, thank you for being with us today. Any closing words for our viewers as we depart?
Thank you for being agents of radiant change. The work that you do matters. You are planting seeds. Keep going. Thank you.
Hey, it's me again. This is a friendly reminder if you are an ICF member. Now that you've fully reviewed this session recording, simply scroll down to the session resources and find a 1-question quiz. Please complete it and you will ensure you've received the CC units for this session. And if you've already attended this session live, you've already been granted the CC units and you don't need to complete this quiz. See you soon. Bye-bye.